Last week we talked about the basics on FASD pertaining to what FASD stands for and the 5 types of FASD. Today we are going to talk about the symptoms of FASD. I'm not going to talk about specifically the facial features because we already talked about the specific facial features on our last video, but I am going to point out that did you know that the specific FASD facial features happen at the very beginning of pregnancy in a very small window of time? The facial features can happen between the 8th and 21st day of gestation. And those are that is the cutoff. It does not go before, it does not go past the 21st day. So it's a very small window of time. Symptom that can arise when we talk about FASD is hyperactivity and the lack of being able to stay attentive. That's one of the reasons why a lot of people with FASD can get misdiagnosed with ADHD before they ever get an FASD diagnosis. That being said, did you know that people with FASD are 10 times more likely to get ADHD than the general public? People with FASD can struggle with reasoning and judgment and knowing what is the best course of action to take in certain situations. That's why a lot of people with FASD can struggle with the law, because we don't necessarily think through our actions before we do it. People with FASD can struggle with emotional dysregulation. That's one of the reasons a lot of people with FASD actually get misdiagnosed with bipolar disorder, a mental health condition, psychiatric disorders, before a doctor ever thinks about FASD. A lot of us struggle with something called SPD, or sensory processing disorder. SPD, or sensory processing disorder, is an umbrella term. It is not a medical diagnosis. It basically is a term used to describe people that have sensory issues. So your central nervous system can be greatly affected by prenatal alcohol exposure and FASD. Some of the things we can deal with when it comes to our sensory processing is being hypersensitive or hyposensitive, meaning we can be really hypersensitive to certain things or very low sensitive to certain things, meaning like someone like myself could have hypersensitive hearing, but when it comes to indicating if we are in pain, we might have hyposensitivity to that, so we might not recognize that we are in pain. Our senses can be affected when it comes to sensory processing disorder, meaning visual, auditory, smell, taste, tactile, which is touch, vestibular, a sense of head movement in space, proprioception, a sense from muscles and joints of the body in space, and then interoception, which is internal, what we feel inside. Like, do we know if we're hungry? Do we know we need to go to the bathroom? That can all be affected. We can struggle with a concept called executive dysfunction. The definition of executive dysfunction is symptoms that happen with conditions that disrupt your brain's ability to control thoughts, emotions, and behavior. Sometimes one of the first symptoms of FASD that a parent might notice is that their baby or infant or child may not be reaching their milestones the way that their peers might be, or their siblings. So that is another symptom that FASD might be the reason. One of the weirder things that people with FASD might struggle with is we do not have good short-term memory. Our short-term memory can be greatly affected. I struggle with remembering people's names. When I was in school and a lesson would be brought up for that day or unit, that's not necessarily means that I would remember it for the next day, which always drove some teachers mad because they were like, we just taught you this yesterday. And I was like, yeah, short-term memory loss. Sorry. Learning disabilities is another symptom of FASD. A lot of people with FASD can struggle in school, specifically with math. We have a very hard time understanding abstract concepts which math is definitely a concept that is abstract. So a lot of people like myself can have very low levels of understanding of math. People can have a hard time with learning to read and write, writing specifically because they might have fine motor skill issues, which is pencil grasping and writing. I have trouble more with the grammatical side of writing, not so much the physical side. So a lot of people will have trouble reading my stuff because it has many spelling mistakes. We can have issues with gross motor skills, which is our big muscles, that can impact a lot of gym class and recess, which is very important to help kids with social skills and interacting with their peers. I can remember one time jump rope was a big thing on the playground, and me and my sister had not gotten the skills necessary to jump rope. And so a lot of peers didn't want to necessarily play with us because they would have to have the patience to allow us to learn how to jump rope, and they didn't have the patience. Or they would use us knowing that we were not good at jumping rope, and they'd make up this rule: if you stumble in the line when you're skipping with a group, you have to hold the rope. So guess who had to hold the rope a lot of the time? Yeah, that sucked. Speech and language delays is a big one. A lot of people with FASD might have to go to speech therapy to help grow their language skills. I was one of those people that went to speech therapy on and off as a kid, and yeah, it's a good therapy to have access to. People with FASD can have intellectual disability and can vary on the IQ score. Now, I really want to preference this because I'm not a big fan of the IQ concept anymore because it's linked in racism, ableism, and classism. So yes, some people with FASD can have a low IQ. That doesn't necessarily mean all of us can have low IQ or intellectual disabilities. IQ scores recorded for individuals living with FASD range from 45 to 120 and above. So it cannot be used as the only measurement for FASD. Children with FASD can have IQ in the average or higher of average, but still struggle with severe impairment in the other areas. People with FASD a lot of times struggle in school, which would make sense if you struggle with peer interaction, social skills, and the curriculum. So it makes sense that a lot of kids with FASD might struggle in school and might not like school. People with FASD can also struggle with social cues, like knowing when to look at someone when they are being spoken to, knowing when to jump into a conversation at the appropriate time, making sure that what they are talking about is on topic for what is talked about in a group setting. A lot of people with FASD might not be at the same cognitive age as their peers, making peer interactions difficult. Some of the things that people with FASD, the symptom-wise at birth, might be a low birth weight, smaller head size. They could come out as preemies, which can happen if you drink alcohol while pregnant. Premature birth is a thing and is linked to alcohol consumption while pregnant. We can have shorter than average height. I am only 5 feet. My sister is, I think, 5'8", 5'9". We can have vision issues and hearing issues, but there are so many more things that can impact someone with FASD. Our immune systems can be compromised because our immune systems can be damaged and not be able to function well. So getting sick with everyday sicknesses is way more common with people with FASD. People with FASD can deal with sleeping issues and I was just diagnosed with a condition called behavioral sleep disorder, and I take melatonin to help me sleep. A lot of people with FASD might need medication to help in their process of getting to sleep. Now, I know I missed a ton of symptoms when it comes to FASD, but that's because, did you know there are 428 co-occurring conditions linked to FASD and prenatal alcohol exposure? That's a lot of conditions. That shows that there's still a ton of information that I want to share with you guys when it comes to FASD and prenatal alcohol exposure. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you on the next video. Bye, guys!